I would like to welcome everybody to the 5,550th meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago. Rotary One is now in session. We're going to start, as we always do, with the thought of the day. And to do the thought today, I'm going to turn the floor over to our very own Caped Crusader for Peace and Justice, Mr. Evan Freund. Evan, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's a wonderful day here at Chicago. The Rotary four-way test starts with a very simple question. Is it the truth? It's not always easy to discern and to admit the truth. And when the truth is known, as Maya Angelou has pointed out, courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently.
Thank you very much, Evan. Great words. And I'm actually going to build on that a little bit today, because I do want to pause for a moment and say a few words, and I will use my bully pulpit here a bit. I seem to be finding myself spending way too much of my presidency offering words of encouragement and support for my members during challenging and unprecedented times, only to have more challenging and unprecedented times emerge. And once again, and most unfortunately, I find myself in that position here this afternoon. I know anger is running high, and I can sense that right now just about nobody can see straight. And I don't think I'm any better with that myself, and I won't claim to be. And as always, we want to know what we can do as Rotarians and as concerned, civic-minded citizens. So I want to take a few steps back then and talk about what seems to be, to me, an inability to communicate, an inability to debate, and a proclivity towards dehumanizing those who have different opinions. And an overall result of all of this is living in seemingly non-intersecting spheres of reality. If we were a Venn diagram, there'd be no intersecting of those circles. But similar to what Evan has mentioned, like our speaker today, whose job it is to find the truth, the first tenet of our four-way test of the things we think, say, or do, again, as Evan said, is it the truth? But unfortunately, unlike in math and science, finding truth in much of life is a lot more nuanced than we'd like to believe. There's, of course, bias, which I know is a four-letter word, but not always. We're humans, and it's hard for us. It's hard for bias not to enter what we say or do. In my personal experience, reading various news sources, the key biases that stand out to me are selection bias or bias by omission, which just means that the information is factual, but not all of the facts have been included one way or the other. There's, of course, the inclusion of opinions, which is pretty natural. Frankly, I don't know that I've ever seen a newspaper headline that didn't have an opinion baked into it, because purely factual news headlines are kind of boring and not that interesting to click on. Of course, there's then the next step is actual fabrication of information, unsubstantiated claims. And then sometimes, frankly, there's just good old-fashioned bad journalism. I've certainly worked on projects in the transportation sphere that have been victims of that. There was no angst or animosity. It was just the journalists didn't really know what they were writing about, and the information was wrong. So with all of this, it's important to absorb news from different perspectives. So I'm going to ask Shelby to throw a chart up on the screen. It's a news bias chart, and there are various versions of this. You can find this online. I frankly find this to be very helpful. There's bias in the bias chart, of course, as well, but I think it gives you a relative sense of things. And I think you need to convince yourself, which is hard, that when you're reading something that falls off of the center line, which they basically all do in one way or the other, that the bias is going to be baked in, even if, and especially if, it confirms what you already believe. I ask that if you're reading something on one side of that line, try to find something that mirrors it on the other. And I know that's really hard to do. And I'll tell you about a place that I go that helps me with that. There's a site called The Flip Side. And basically, I'm signed up for their daily emails. It's free, so I'm not advertising them here. They pick a hot topic each day, and they list excerpts of key liberal opinions in one column and key conservative opinions in the other, all from major news sources that you see on this chart. And I'll tell you, I learn something every day. I think it's very well done. I think it's very tasteful. And they even go so far as to sometimes switch the columns, so you don't get stuck into thinking that, oh, this is the column I agree with and this is the column that I don't. So that's my first ask of us as Rotarians. My second ask is that you think very carefully about forwarding things on social media. I know that if you're going to forward something, it means you probably agree with it and it probably makes sense to you, but it doesn't necessarily make it true. There's misattributed quotes, photos that are miscited. I see it all the time, even with things that I agree with, like I said. So I think as people who seek the truth, it's important to look for that. If the original post seems to come from a random person that you don't know, as opposed to perhaps a news source at the very least, it's probably something that could be a little bit suspect. So I just want to make sure that we're all mindful and thoughtful about those things, and we all contribute to our civil and civic discourse. So enough of that. I want to move on today with our program, and I do want to thank a couple of folks. First, I mentioned it before we got started, but my friend Jisung Shin, who works for the Inspector General's office, for first making the connection, and then Natalie Kuriata, the Inspector General's office, to actually make the arrangements for the meeting. I want to thank you both for being here today with us and for helping us. Now I'd like to introduce one of our newest members. She's the Executive Director of Project Cure here in Chicago. I'd like to turn the floor over to Beth Rutman.
Thanks, Eric. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Joseph Ferguson to the group. Joseph is currently serving his third term as the Inspector General for the City of Chicago. Previously, he spent 15 years at the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern Illinois District. There, he focused on money laundering, complex fraud, financial crimes, healthcare fraud, labor racketeering, and terrorism. He is co-chairman of the Chicago Procurement Reform Task Force and on the Police Accountability Task Force. He is currently a lecturer at Loyola University Chicago School of Law and co-director of the National Security and Civil Rights Program. We are honored to have Joseph Ferguson here today with us at Rotary One.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. Ji-Sung, hello. And Natalie, hello. We work together, but we work remotely like everybody else these days. So every opportunity to actually have a direct touch or contact from whatever medium is always appreciated. I am going to, the one thing that I am not expert in is technology. And can you just let me know whether or not the screen that you're seeing contains the PowerPoint that I'm working from? Yes? Ben?
Yes, it does.
All right. Hold on, one more thing. Let's do, there we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk relatively quickly, which I always do, but I'm going to give you a lot of information, some of it from the slides, some of it from beyond the slides, and we'll have time at the end, I understand, for questions. So the City of Chicago Office of Inspector General, we're going to talk about the city itself. Some of these things you folks know, some of them maybe not. The city currently has 2.7 million residents. Third largest city in the United States, probably soon to be the fourth largest city, once was the second city, still refers to itself as the second city. There is a lag in the cultural narrative relative to reality, but that's everybody. There's almost 33,000 employees of the city, people actually employed by the city. A huge portion of them are in what we refer to as the public safety functions of the city, which are, for a major municipality, probably among the single most important things in the way of services that a municipality provides. But as you can see from the slide, over 18,000 of the 33,000, approximate 33,000 employees are either employees of the police department or the fire department. The police department, obviously, much in the news, and police departments generally, especially major municipal police departments, much in the news across the United States for lots of reasons and for unfortunate reasons, but appropriately in the public eye and under scrutiny. We'll talk a little bit about that. The city's overall budget, $12.8 billion budget, the 2021 budget. And right now, the city is operating with a functional deficit that is significantly addressed by federal funding that's received as COVID related. And the deficit itself is a COVID impacted deficit because of the suppression of all sorts of economic activity that all municipalities, all parts of the country are experiencing. The revenue streams to the city are depressed right now, and federal funding, grant sources, and emergency funding otherwise are filling that deficit. That being said, the city, and this is something that's endemic in governments everywhere, has been operating with a deficit for many years. It is a structural deficit, but what we tend to do in the country at all levels of government is define balanced budget in ways that allow for a structural deficit to continue to operate in that fashion. The consequence in Chicago is we actually have some major fiscal cliffs that we are dealing with right now, most significantly in what has been the long-term gross underfunding of its pension obligations. That's a critical issue for Chicago. It's a critical issue for Illinois right now, which also has major deficits, both debt-related and pension-related. The government of the city of Chicago, there are 3 citywide elected officials, the mayor, a treasurer, and a clerk. The treasurer and the clerk's offices are fairly recent mintings in the grand scheme of things, and they perform more kind of technical, clerical, ministerial duties than actually providing true, meaningful, substantive contributions. In many other cities, those are entities, those are functions that would be part of the executive branch under the mayor. Here we have them as separate elected bodies. There's politics and political reasons behind that. I'm not going to go into those. Beside the citywide elected officials, there's 50 aldermen or city councilors. That is a huge number. There are 50 separate wards in the city. Each of them have an elected official. If you compare it to, say, New York City, in New York City, there's 15 city councilors. There is an interesting thing that comes of that, and that is that representation is hyper-localized, and there are very few aldermen who represent districts or wards that are diverse ethnically, racially, socioeconomically. And so there's sort of a tunnel vision in terms of the perspective that they carry from their constituents. And what it means is quite often aldermen are seldom put in the position and forced to sort of account for the greater interests of the city. So all sorts of interesting political dynamics stem from that. There are approximately 35 departments of the city, and there's next slide. We'll go through quickly a few of those. Scores of what we refer to as delegate agencies, basically non-for-profit corporations. Most often in the social service realm, the social welfare service realm in traditional vernacular, that receive through the city, flowing down from the federal government, grant funds for all sorts of programs to poor and underserved communities. They're all components of the delivery of city services. And then there are thousands of contractors, subcontractors, and vendors. All right, that's sort of, well, we'll go one more here on the backdrop. And here is an organizational chart of the city. And so up here, and you seldom see this in organizational charts, the people we serve, the shareholders, if you will, from a corporate perspective. And unfortunately, we do not often enough think of the voters and the residents of the city as shareholders. We refer to them, though, as stakeholders generally. But everybody else is supposed to be working to the service of them. And in fact, the ethics code of the city makes it an obligation of every single employee and official to act as a fiduciary for the public good and the public generally. But as you see, city council, mayor, city clerk, city treasurer, the council itself has a committee structure. It is not the most robust in terms of how those committees operate. There is a sort of core kind of enterprise spanning group of committees: budget, finance, zoning, and a few other, transportation, and a few others. But there's also kind of many sort of small, very specialized committees. There's an enormous number of committees which actually has an adverse impact on the overall operation and effectiveness of the city council as a check and balance on executive authority held by the mayor. And broken down here, and I think this slideshow will be made available to everybody going forward, so I won't go after this, but we've broken it down by sort of major areas of city operations, again noting that a massive portion of the overall city personnel are in the police department and the fire department. So inspectors general, they exist across the country. Every federal agency and major program has an IG. It is a field and an enterprise that has evolved over the last 50 years. And not every municipality has one. And Chicago is, in many respects, one of sort of a handful of municipalities with a full service inspector general. But the mission of the Chicago Inspector General's office is exactly the mission that exists for basically the gold standard, which are the federal IGs. And for all of you follow the news very closely, this has been 2020 was quite a year and 2019 as well, for conflict between inspectors general and the president and the executive branch generally. The mission of IGs and the Chicago IG is to be an independent and nonpartisan office that, and these are the words that are written into law, promote economy, effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity in the operations of the government that it has jurisdictional authority over. And we do that in a variety of ways, which I'm going to go through in the next slides. General overview, our powers and jurisdiction are written into law that was first enacted in 1989. Basically incorporating the Federal Inspector General Act and the standards as it existed then, and it has evolved over time, expanding jurisdiction. Our personal jurisdiction, the jurisdiction extends to city officials, both appointed and elected, all employees of the city, contractors, subcontractors, vendors, licensees, and lobbyists. That's a lot of people. How do we do that? Again, promoting economy, effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity in city operations through a number of different types of lanes or mechanisms. One, performance audits and reviews, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each of them in coming slides. Performance audits and reviews of municipal governments and programs, investigation of all sorts of violations of law, regulation, policy, compliance monitoring as to a very sort of specialized aspect of city operations, its employment and hiring realm, which was the subject of a 45-year lawsuit that involved court oversight of the city's employment practices, and then a number of transparency mechanisms that I'll talk about as well. The office, how is it staffed and resourced? I mentioned that the budget of the city was $12.8 billion for fiscal 2021. The IG's budget is $10.9 million. And so because the IG looks into things that identifies both problems and malfeasance and malfeasors, it is not much beloved. It's not a good day when IGs come calling saying, we're here to talk to you, whether it's simply an audit or it's an investigation. there's a tension, and it's a healthy tension. Sometimes it's not so healthy, but generally that tension is just built into what it is that we do. So how do you protect and make sure that an IG actually does things in an independent fashion? Well, first off, the leader of the office has term protection. There's a 4-year term, and it runs independent of mayoral terms. Second, selection process. There is this sort of independent national search that's set forth in law with certain job qualifications for who can be recruited for the position. And an independent search committee serves up a short list to the mayor. The mayor makes a selection from the short list, and the city council has to approve the person who's taking the position with that term protection. There's a statutory budget floor. This is really important. It means that our budget can't be cut below a certain level, which means quite often the kind of the retaliatory measure or the retributive measure for going into business that people would rather you didn't go into would be to cut your budget. It's written into law that our budget can't go below 0.14% of the overall city budget. Independent of benefits, our appropriation for 2021 is $10.9 million. And that's mostly goes to staff, which is the norm. But we have 103 people broken out into these sections, which I will now go through. Audit and program review, public safety, investigations, diversity, equity, inclusion, and compliance, the legal section, and the Center for Information Technology and Analytics. So audit and program review. Everything. So this is a government performance audit shop that is not merely modeled on, but operates pursuant to the standards of the Federal Government Accountability Office, utilizing their standards, their processes, their platforms, hiring the same type of people that they hire. How do we know what it is that they do? We went to them and said, how do you do your work? Because you are the gold standard. And so what this unit does is conduct independent performance audits of a wide range of city programs and services, looking for waste and inefficiency, risk and liability, and looking to promote, and in addition to improved operations, through findings and identifications of recommendations for better operations, also transparency and accountability overall. The work of the Audit and Program Review Unit is roughly pursuant to an annual plan. We generate that annual plan in draft form in the fall prior to the fiscal year, and it is generated from a variety of sources, things that we've learned through other of our work in the previous year or years, but also a great deal of survey and outreach to the public, suggestions from the public, and also a risk assessment that is done wholesale every couple of years. But also in more surgical fashion in areas we know to be problematic. That annual plan is posted for public comment and then finalized by the beginning of the fiscal year. And we operate roughly according to that plan. It's more than we can ever do. And as a year progresses, there's always new issues that come up that result in us changing priorities. We issue public reports on everything that we do. And these are very, very detailed, comprehensive reports. We try to make them user-friendly with summary sections and infographics, but every report is public. The publication of the report is very, very critical, not merely for transparency, but for the dynamics of accountability. And the dynamics of accountability mean basically to bring out into the public domain, so it's almost a political necessity that the subjects of an audit actually are responsive to what it is that we have found and the recommendations. And we do a follow-up to every audit 9 to 12 months later to report on whether or not the department or the component of the city is doing or has done what it committed to doing in response to the original audit. We have a public safety section that is the newest part of the office. Created pursuant to the recommendations of the Police Accountability Task Force and the Justice Department in the inquiries that were conducted in reaction and response to the publication of the Laquan McDonald video that spawned wholesale inquiry into the practices of the police department, particularly in relation to constitutional policing. This public safety unit does audit-based work, but it is dedicated entirely to the police and police accountability components of the city. And so they review the operations and evaluate the operations of the police department, CPD, COPA, which is a civilian disciplinary investigative body, and the police board, which is a judicial body for the more serious forms of police misconduct infractions. And we make recommendations to increase public safety, protect civil liberties, civil rights, improve public trust, so on and so forth. Some examples of things that we have done in recent years include things that would make people's kind of eyes glaze over, but are really important to an effective police department. CPD records management. And we take a look at how it is that CPD manages its record keeping system. And people would say, what does that have to do with what police officers are doing in the field? Well, it has a lot to do with what police officers do in the field, particularly detectives. I will tell you, one of the greatest challenges for the Chicago Police Department in the reform that will take years and years to effectuate is the fact that it is an administratively, bureaucratically mediocre operation. And its record management reflects that. A huge portion of its records are still analog, meaning paper, and there's 52 different custodians of records scattered all over the department with no one master record keeping system. You might imagine what that would mean if you are a detective, if you are a litigant, if you are somebody seeking public information. So that's an example of something that's kind of obscure that people wouldn't look at. Something that people would think about is the city's utilization of gang information and designation of, based on our review, 130,000 citizens of the city of Chicago as gang members. Are there 130,000 people in the city of Chicago who are gang members? I can tell you affirmatively the answer is no. There's 130,000 people with that designation on them with all sorts of adverse consequences to their ability to function in society. So both the obscure and the things that actually impact people in their lives and in the communities. The investigation section conducts misconduct investigations of a vast array of different types of legal matrices. Federal law, state law, municipal law, department and city policies regarding all sorts of theft, misconduct, waste, incompetence, so on and so forth. Some examples, major procurement and contract fraud, which that's not just Chicago, that's every place where there's money. And there's major contracts that are being let and major construction work being done. Program fraud, like the Minority and Women Business Enterprise Program, always the subject of attempts to defraud that program. EEOC, discrimination and sexual harassment, theft of materials and time and conversion of public property, and misuse of official authority, public corruption, bribery. All of these things investigated by the office. If it's criminal, it's almost certain to be done in concert with and coordinate with an external, usually federal investigative body like the FBI, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So when you see a public corruption prosecution involving the city, that is something that almost certainly the Inspector General's office either originated, but certainly was part of that investigation and prosecution. And then at the administrative level, what we do is where there are sustained violations, those get served up in confidential reports going to the relevant department heads in the city with findings and recommendations for disciplinary action or procurement action if it's a contractor. We receive over 2,300 complaints or allegations a year, have a very, very elaborate kind of evaluation or vetting process on the front end. And at any point in time, we have about 200 investigations that are open and ongoing. Another mission section, diversity, equity, inclusion, and compliance. And this originates in what I mentioned before, 45 years of court litigation over the city's unconstitutional patronage hiring practices that really are tied to its deep history. But there is a compliance unit, a specialized compliance unit that in recent times has expanded to cast a lens for diversity, equity, and inclusion purposes on city operations, and most particularly the police department these days, both internally and externally. And then we have a number of enterprise functions, a legal section which provides counsel and has assigned counsel to absolutely every single project and initiative that we do, an operations section that supports administratively the entire office, a communications and outreach engagement function. And Natalie, who's on the line here, is our communications director. And outreach and engagement, critically important. We get out into the community to hear from people, to hear how government is impacting them, their impressions, what they would like to see us look into on the way to improving things. And then finally, and this is the last substantive slide that I have before we open it up for questions, is something that we created about 5 years ago called the Center for Information Technology and Analytics. We draw upon, through back-end access to all of the major databases that the city has, we've compiled basically a independent data warehouse, clean the data, structure the data for use for statistical modeling, trends, predictions, and analysis that enable us to develop cases, conduct citywide program reviews and audits, and monitoring hiring practices and other practices. And again, this is real-time back-end access to data. What in doing this for our work, we sort of came to the realization that this is in many respects the public's data, and we should present what is going on that we see rooted in the data, so long as there is no legal prohibition, in the form of visualization through our information portal. Our website, igchicago.org, if you go to the homepage, you will see an icon to click on to the information portal, and that will take you into all kinds of Tableau dashboards that visualize aspects of operations of the city, the budget, the composition of the city workforce, some of our activities, but most particularly, and this is where our first generation focus, and it has been and will continue to be, all sorts of aspects of the operation of the Chicago Police Department, including its composition in all sorts of ways, as well as certain of its activities. And these are not merely user-friendly visualizations, they're interactive. There's all sorts of filters for you to engage, to focus on your neighborhood, your ward, and to all sorts of different components and aspects of the city. This entire information portal realm is green, meaning it's constantly being evolved. And there's opportunity and functions in there for people who engage it to tell us what else they would like to see in it. So I encourage you all to go to it. So that's us. And I will stop there and open it to questions.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. That was very informative, very interesting, and very exciting. As somebody who over the years has often done a lot of work as a consultant for the Chicago Department of Transportation, I now know that I am under the purview of the Inspector General's office as well, apparently. So that's also good to know. So we have a couple of questions here that have come in. The first one goes back to one of the points you touched upon early in your presentation about the organization of city government, and you talked about the proliferation of aldermen in the city, causing some accountability issues. I would imagine probably some cost and inefficiency issues as well. And we could probably even back that up to, some of the elected positions in the executive branch and maybe overlapping departments. What are the chances of fixing some of those kinds of structural problems, like reducing the number of aldermen?
Look, the stressors of the times leave me oddly a little more optimistic that the greater forces acting on us, because look, everything that's going on right now in society, in our society, in the world, but in our city as well, is a stress test. And there are a lot of seams that are being exposed. And the one that has to do with the structure and the size of government is one that we've all kind of carried. What we haven't had is the impetus to say, you know what, we've really got to do something about it. And the reason that I'm somewhat optimistic beyond the stressors of the time is that there are reference points elsewhere in the United States for major cities that have actually undertaken empowered charter commissions to look at how its government is operating and how it needs to be changed. The structure of the government of Los Angeles changed in the late 1990s by the charging of a charter commission that was prompted by a couple of things, including a major police scandal. And so the city of Los Angeles in the late 90s changed its form of government. In the late 80s, combination, again, scandal, but also some findings by a court that the structure of the government operated in unconstitutional fashion relative to the Voting Rights Act, resulted in the charging of a charter commission that radically restructured New York City government, including shrinking the number of city councilors, changing who actually holds elected positions, how they relate to each other, and creating certain fixed in law criteria and standards for how government must operate. And additionally, created law that said they've got to do that every 10 years. We all know in Chicago, we should be undertaking some sort of generational examination. And the reason that I carry some optimism is the stressors force us all to talk about it. And Los Angeles and New York, among others, give us some models of how to go about it.
Oh, that's great. And that is good to know, because sometimes it seems like somewhat of an intractable problem. Does the city council still maintain a separate IG for their own oversight? Modeled history, MOTT. In 1989, when the original enabling ordinance was created, the city council cut itself out from any oversight. That changed in 2010, when the mayor proposed putting the city council under this office's oversight. The city council said, and particularly Alderman Burke at the time said, nope, we're not going to have any of that. We're going to create our own legislative IG. They did. It was a shackled sort of function that revealed itself as such. And in 2015, in the first of two steps, jurisdiction for the city council was put under this office. And that was perfected, if you will, in 2017. So for the last 3 years or so, this office has had oversight of the city council. You see that reflected in some of the investigative and prosecutorial activity that is ongoing relating to elected officials. You will also see it in the coming years with respect to audits that are published as to aspects of the operation of the city council. Got it. Well, that's also good news and good progress. One of the questions is, does the IG office recommend changes in state law to improve efficiency and effectiveness of municipal administration? Where
there are constraints for improvements that are a function of limitations cast by state law, our recommendations to the political actors in the city is to consider going to the state legislature and seek those changes. We do not make recommendations to the state legislature itself, but we do urge action by the political actors to take the issues that are state legal constraints to the state legislature and propose for changes in the law. Got it. Got a question on diversity, equity, inclusion, and compliance. Is there any information available to the public on the goals and current stats for each of the city departments in that area? So the answer is no, because the city doesn't necessarily have specific goals and stats. I think, as a number of you probably are aware, the DEI enterprise is a relatively new one, and its importance has only recently been fully embraced by the city itself. There is a diversity officer for the city for the first time, and she has been, in the first 18 months in the job, formulating programmatically exactly what this question asks for: goals, mechanisms for achieving those goals, and stats. As to the stats, there is one realm where we can affirmatively say you can go and get that information. And that's go to the information portal, igchicago.org, and you can actually see the composition of the city workforce by race, by ethnicity, by gender, by part, broken down by geography, by position, by title. And so, for example, you want to know, and we talk about this quite a bit, the police department of the city of Chicago does not match the racial and ethnic makeup or the gender makeup of the city itself. We want to have a police department that actually looks like the city. Why? Because people are more embracing of those from the government who come from their communities and who understand them. And you can look and see on our on the public safety icon within our information portal exactly how we're missing the mark, and we're missing the mark by quite a bit. And you could trace this through the years, going back 7 or 8 years, and see how this is evolving. And what you would see right now is that the greatest area of deficit is with respect to African American officers, particularly male officers. And we're facing a demographic cliff where their numbers are not actually far from growing or holding steady. They're going to rapidly decrease in the next 5 years unless we undertake significant measures to improve our recruitment of African American men, particularly from around the city. So there's a lot of that information. Natalie just put up the link in the chat box to the information portal. And so back to the questioners, to the question is, I would expect during 2021 for a lot of those goals, objectives, and initiatives to become a matter of public presentation by the mayor's office, but they don't exist in a robust fashion right now. And what we try to do with the data is to push them to move that along more quickly.
When I think about what you guys do and the budget you're able to work with and the great staff, if I do say so, that you guys have, I think of an old joke that some stand-up comedian said in response to a plane crash about, why don't you just make the whole plane out of the black box? So I guess what I'm thinking is if you have such a good office in the Inspector General's office, is there a way for the rest of government to sort of mold itself in the way of the Inspector General's office? Because it seems that the rest of city government doesn't really have what you guys have in terms of talent and budget.
So some of that's a function of the independence and the independence from sort of a non-political perspective. And so I'll answer your question at a number of levels. So first off, thanks for the question, because it sort of carries with it a form of kind of tribute to what we are. But it baked into the mission is the responsibility to actually model the behavior. To set the standard for the city. If we're going to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. And if we're not walking the walk, then we got no business talking, right? So we put the pressure on ourselves. But how that applies to the rest of the city, I will tell you, oversight is a multi-legged stool. And there's one component of it historically that just has not been in operation in the measure that it needs to. If you look at the federal system, IGs and auditors, they primarily their work serves the legislature, who then take that work and pour it into meaningful, substantive committee hearings that generates legislative reforms and puts the executive branch to account for improving, right? In Chicago, we're not there. We do not have a city council that does that, which maybe goes back to your earlier question. The question that Eric, that you put out there is, how do we change the city council? In order for us to get to the place that your question proposes, Eric, we're going to need to have effective legislative oversight. We're going to need to have meaningful legislative checks on the mayor to really drive. And this is not to be critical of the office of the mayor historically or even present. It's just, you don't get better without critical engagement. And the critical engagement at the citywide level means that we need to have a city council that is a meaningful component of oversight and accountability.
That makes a lot of sense, and thank you for the answer there. I'll wrap up with one final question. What can we do as Rotarians to promote your mission?
For everyone that you know and deal with, whether it's in your personal life or in your professional life, let them know, because Chicago, by its narrative, and it's a narrative that we're oddly proud of, our roguish history, if you will, that there is a component of city government, and it seems to be counterintuitive to a lot of people and what they perceive of Chicago, that it would have an independent oversight body that actually is seen as a model nationally. Tell people that we're there. igchicago.org. Send your comments, your suggestions, send the things that you're seeing that just aren't right. I will give you one sort of quick example of something that seems so minuscule, but it's an annoyance that we all carry, that if we're told about it through our complaint line, it's going to get smart people thinking, what should we be doing? And that is, and this goes back a number of years now, one of our investigators outside of our office saw a Teamster, a motor truck driver, sitting in a pickup truck, reading the newspaper right outside our offices. And was like, well, that's a lot of nerve. What's he there for? Well, he was there while a city painter is painting a curb yellow and a fire hydrant red, freshening up the paint. And we're like, okay, that guy is loafing. That guy wasn't loafing. That guy was doing what the collective bargaining agreement said he could and couldn't do, which was he had to drive a painter to the work site because the painter isn't allowed to drive his own vehicle to the work site. And then once he's there, he has to wait, and he can't help the painter because that's the painter's work under their contract. And just that one example alone resulted in a report in which we identified that the city had 200 to 250 motor truck drivers, Teamsters, that on average we have to pay for salary and pay and benefits, $120,000 a year. We didn't need those. We didn't need them at all if we operated based on the simple kind of logistics and efficiencies of contractors that we actually hired to do similar work, which in the context of that one contract meant $25 million a year wasted in taxpayer money, right? So that one little example, we want to know about it. If you have bigger suggestions, we want to know about it. We want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. The folks that are members of this organization are engaged citizens. We need engaged citizens to tell us where we need to be looking, because we can't be everywhere.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. And I'm sure I echo everybody else here when I say we're glad you're here. You're doing great work. Your group is doing great work. And we want to offer you just it's a very small gift, a very small token of our gratitude. It's a little candle. We give these to all of our speakers, and it's from a local community-based organization with our goal of affecting lasting change in Chicago as well. The proceeds from these candles support Bright Endeavors. Their mission is to empower young moms by providing transitional jobs and professional skills training. So this not only helps those moms, supports their kids, and ultimately supports their community. So we will get you one of these in the mail.
And that will not go to me. That will go to a public place in the office so everyone can see it. We will make sure our staff knows about your organization and your good work. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to all of you, and for your civic engagement.
You bet. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. As I said, you and your team are welcome to stick around as we move on with the meeting. If you have other things you need to get to, that's also totally understood. Thank you very much. All right, you as well. So one of the great phenomenon that we've been able to experience here in this club, despite the pandemic, is a growing list of members who have seen the good work that we're doing and the great programs that we have and have decided to join the club. And so we do have a new member induction today. So I'd like to pass the floor over to our membership chair, Laura Inns. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, we do have a new member to induct today. Danilo Toshik, I think is how you pronounce your name. We're going to go ahead and welcome our newest member. So it is my great pleasure on behalf of the Board of Directors and members of the Rotary Club of Chicago to welcome you as a member of Rotary One. We welcome you not only for the fine fellowship that we shall share, but also for your talents, abilities, and enthusiasm that will help us carry out our many projects to make our community, our country, and the world a better place to live. And I hear you've already been started. Rotary is not a political organization, but all Rotarians are vitally concerned with everything pertaining to good citizenship and the election of good men and women to public office. Rotary is not a charitable organization, yet its activities exemplify the charity and the sacrifices that one should expect from people who believe that they have a responsibility to help others. Rotary is not a religious organization, but it is built on those eternal principles that have served as the moral compass for people throughout the ages. Rotary is an organization of business and professional people pledged to upholding the highest professional standards. Rotarians believe that worldwide fellowship and international peace can be achieved when business people unite under the banner of service. Danilo, you have been chosen for membership in the Rotary Club of Chicago because your fellow Rotarians believe you to be a leader in your profession and because you manifest the intelligence and commitment of heart that fit you to interpret and impart the message of Rotary. You are a representative of your profession in this club, and any information of an educational value pertaining to your profession which naturally come to us through you. At the same time, you are now an ambassador from us to your profession. We rely upon you to carry the principles and ideals of service that we aspire to as Rotarians to those who share your professional activity. The community will know and judge Rotary by your embodiment of it in character and service. And we accept you as a member because we know our principles and organization will be safe in your keeping. We also expect you to give us the inspiration that will help us become better Rotarians. And it is with this hope that we recognize you as the newest member of the Rotary Club of Chicago. Also, you will be receiving a pin. As a member of Rotary One, you not only receive a Rotary pin for Rotary International, but also our unique club pin, which includes the numeral 1, because we are, of course, the first. So at this time, I would like to turn over.
Well, it appears Laura may have frozen up here, but I think Laura was about to hand the floor over to Danilo to make a brief introduction. If you can give us just the 60-second overview, Danilo, of who you are and what you do and why you're joining the Rotary Club of Chicago.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Laura. My name is Danilo Tošić, and I was born in Serbia. I grew up there, finished school, and then about 8 years ago, I moved to the United States. Here, I got into trucking industry, and I started off with selling trucks and trailers for a local company. Then after that, I opened my own recruiting company that helps drivers find companies to work for. And then later on, I also opened up a company that's designed to help trucking companies grow by providing different services like trucks, trailers, insurance, fuel, and all similar stuff that trucking company would need. Then later on, I also founded my own trucking company. And most recently, I founded a humanitarian organization that's called Millennials for Serbia, and whose goal is to help those in need in Serbia. And it's my great honor and privilege for you guys to be accepting me to Rotary One. And I'll be happy to help you guys in making this community a better place to live in. And so you have all my resources at your disposal, and I will be there whenever called upon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the club.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eric, we'll turn it back over to you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Danilo. And I want to point out to everybody that not only does Danilo say that he wants to help, but he has already been involved in several service projects and stepped up even before he actually became a member of this club. So I know that he is true to his word. So it's a pleasure to have him as a member of our club.
Thank you, Eric.
You're quite welcome. So now I'd like to go through introduction of our guests, and we have many on the line here today. And so just to make sure we can get through everybody, if you could just briefly tell us your name, what you do, and if you are a Rotarian, tell us what club you're a part of. So just going through my participant list, I see our old friend Randy Pote is back. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Randy Pote, Las Vegas 1 WON Rotary Club, past district governor of District 5300.
Thank you so much for joining us again. Always good to see you. We have Ann Sutcliffe from the Rotary Club of Sowerby Bridge. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm from the Rotary Club of Sowerby Bridge in the UK, and I am the immediate past president and the district lead for membership. So hello to everybody. Second time attending Chicago 1. So good to see everybody again.
Good to see you as well. Welcome back. We have our next guest is Adekunle Osoba. The floor is yours. Adekunle, you might be on mute. Well, we can come back to Adekunle. Let's move on to our next guest, Catherine Peterson. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you. I'm Catherine Peterson. I'm with the Rotary Club of Spruce Grove, and I am president-elect. Looking forward to my year, which will begin July 1st. And thank you for having us. The opportunity to attend other club meetings has been a great thing during this time of COVID. So I'm thankful to be included in your group.
Well, thank you very much for coming. And yes, that is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, is the ability to hop on other meetings across the world. Our next guest today, David Franklin. Uncle Dave, would you introduce yourself, please? Just got to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, you're on.
Very good. My name is David Franklin. I'm an educator in DuPage County, and I'm not a Rotarian, but I certainly appreciate, the effect of your organization, the sort of organizations that we need right now. I've really learned a lot in this in this meeting, and without him expressly saying, I believe him being the IG, that IG Ferguson, that is, that there is an optimism for Chicago and Illinois, and I think we need that right now. So I turn it back over to Eric, as I eventually will later go on and catch up with some science fiction reading. You guys take care.
Thanks very much, Dave. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week too. Next guest is Hazel Brindle from the UK.
Good evening, everybody. And firstly, congratulations to Danilo on his induction. It's been really pleasant to witness that this evening. I am from Rotary Club of Sowerby Bridge in West Yorkshire. And I'm a past president, which was 2017-18. I am also in my third year as assistant governor for the Southwest Group in District 1040. Been asked to do a further year, which I'm quite looking forward to, and then hopefully return back to my club as an ordinary member and enjoy my club Rotary. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Let's see. Our next guest is Kent Vesterberg. Kent, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Kent Vesterberg, coming from Stockholm West Rotary Club, and I am past president and president-elect in my club. And I have been visit this club 4 times, and the last 3 times was physically in Chicago. And I'm very happy to meet both Irv and Ruth Kaplan, my old friends since many years. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining, Ken, and looking forward to seeing you again in the future. We also have Kevin Dillahunt. Kevin, welcome back and good to see you.
Actually, Eric, it's Katie. I'm using Kevin's computer. Sorry.
Oh, how sneaky. How sneaky. All right. All right. Well, very, very
Hello, everyone.
good to see you too, Katie. We're happy to see you too. Okay. Let's see. Who is our next guest then as I run down the list? I see a lot of members. Mike Theodore, why don't you introduce yourself, even though I think many of us know you by now?
Sure. My name is Mike Theodore. I'm with the Rotary Club of Chicago Lakeview, and very honored to be serving as this club's assistant governor this year. It's always great to pop in, and really props to the programming team of your club, because always on my on lunch breaks, I'm always either in Zoom or on Facebook Live tuning into some of the great speakers you've had. And in a challenging year, it's also really motivating just to see all the great service opportunities that your club's been providing. So really great work to everyone.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good to see you as always. Our next guest, our regular guest, Salvador Farfan. Please introduce yourself.
Hi. Thank you again for having me. Yeah, I'm again a recurring guest from Long Beach, California. And I blame it all to the committee responsible for your programs, because you always have such interesting programs that I just feel compelled to keep coming back. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, Salvador. I agree with that. That's why I keep coming back every week as well. Did I miss any guests here who would like to introduce themselves? Well, I am not hearing any. Oh, yes.
Can I just say hello to Marga Yuko? We have met many times at conventions before, and please say hello to John as well.
Thank you very much. I'll tell him. Thank you for being with us. Okay.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Kat. So let's move on to our announcements then for today. We have a few. First, we want to always highlight our members. So you may notice that if you look at the gyrator for today, we have a nice little story from Mark Smith about his Rotary experience. And we would generally like all of our members, if you have a great story about Rotary, a reflection, something relating to Rotary, perhaps another organization you're part of that would be relevant to our members, please write up a little something for us, and we'll feature it in the gyrator and maybe share it in social media as well. And as Mike Theodore said, we always have a lot of great projects going on, a lot of great service projects. Before the holidays, we had a day of service and celebration along with our holiday party. And we had a couple of projects on that day. One of them was stuffing more bags of hygiene kits, but then we also engaged with the Easter seals. Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about how that went and what we're looking at now on the screen? Oop, you're on mute, Lisa.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Yep, you're good.
These are the only photos that made it into the gyrator, but I wanted to just express my thanks to what was a much bigger team than me and Barbara. Our Easter seals, thanks to Sarah Buck, who came up with the idea to do actually a Zoom party. This turned out to be so much fun and so well done. I just felt that we were at our best that day. And I think that the people at the staff at Easter Seals and the parents and the kids involved in this, certainly seem to think the same. I want to thank Sarah as well as Jody Stawicki and Michelle Stewart, who were absolutely marvelous storytellers to the children. Walter, of course, came on board as Santa Baby again. And Wes really spearheaded a wonderful and interesting book for the kids this year, not only finding a anonymous donor to sponsor part of the cost, but working with a neighbor to get these delivered from Michigan back to Chicago so that we could get them over to Easter Seals. So thanks to all for such a neat experience.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you too for really spearheading this and making it happen. I couldn't agree more that I thought it was, like you say, it was Rotary One at its finest, an event that almost got scrapped because of the pandemic. We made it happen. The kids were happy. And I admit I even got a little bit choked up when I was watching it happen. You guys really made me proud that day.
Thanks.
So you're welcome. Speaking of things that make me proud, every year, Job One, our signature jobs program, where we give job skills training for Chicago high school students and then place them in paid internships across the city of Chicago. We always, around this time of year, as we get the Job One engine revved up, we need employers, we need jobs. So if you have a company that might need an intern or two over the summer, and we can find ways to do this remotely because we made it work this last year, then please let me know, or please let Alita Williams know, or let the office know. It is 20 to 40 hours a week at the city minimum wage of $15 an hour this year, but you make a big difference in the lives of these young people. And this is not charity work. I can tell you, we have our employers come back year after year after year because we screen these students, we train these students. You're going to get an effective and good student. And quite often we find that these companies hire back the students of their own volition in future years. So please let us know if you can help with this. We really need those jobs for these students, especially this year. Let's get an update on the annual campaign. Marga, would you like to provide an update? You may be on mute. Oh, there you go.
Good to see everybody. Well, we have a ways to go. And I was just, my fellow Rotary Club One members, I was giving a little time to breathe, but a group of us is going to call and reach out to everybody who has been maybe too busy to contribute before the end of the year. But we have until June 30th, so you can send us a pledge or you can make a donation, whatever works for you. We have some time, but we really, really, really would like to get donations for both foundations, the Rotary One Foundation that allows us to do our projects, and the Rotary International Foundation that gives us substantial amounts of money, even more money than what we are able to raise for global grants. And I tell you, it is a great investment to donate to both foundations. So we need to reach our goal of $42,000 approximately to reach the 75. So, and we are really low on donations to the Rotary International Foundation. So reach out to me if you have any questions, or look at the information that Tamra is writing in the chat as well. If you look at our website, you will find where to click to send your donations. If you have any questions, I am available to answer them to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marga, and thanks for leading the charge on this and doing such a great job. So as always, we have a lot of exciting meetings coming up. There are always, of course, the regular committee meetings, international service on January 14th, PR marketing January 21st, the next board meeting on February 2nd, and community service coming up on February 4th. All are welcome to join any of those meetings if you want to see how the business of the club takes place, how projects are selected, and so forth. Our upcoming regular Tuesday meetings next week, January 19th, we have Dr. Robert Franklin Jr., who is the President Emeritus of Morehouse College, also just recently ran for the remainder of Congressman John Lewis's seat. So I think he'll have some interesting stories to talk about there, and brother of our guest today, David Franklin. Also, I wanted to point out that before that that meeting, our very own Chief Administrative Officer, Ed Graziano, is going to be hosting a business networking session before that meeting starting at 11:30. So that information will be included in all the announcements coming through over the next week. So everybody is welcome for that. I know we don't really have a lot of time for networking and conversation in this format, so that allows you to get in a little bit early and have a little bit of business networking. So that'll be next Tuesday before the January 19th meeting. January 26th, we have our next in the Sister City series. You may remember we had Vilnius as a very successful first run at this in September with the Chicago Sister Cities organization. And this year, or this month, it'll be Sydney, which is the newest Chicago sister city. Note that it is a special time. It is at 5:30 p.m., not our usual 12:10, in order to accommodate the massive time difference with Sydney. So with that, we always, of course, wrap up our meeting with the four-way test. I'm going to ask one of our guests today. I'm going to ask Kent Vesterberg from Stockholm. I'm going to put him on the spot here since I see that he's still on. Kent, would you be able to read for us the four-way test, which is currently on the screen?
I'm unmuted now. So. Sorry. Yes, I can do that. The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And finally, fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you so much, Kent. I appreciate that. And with that, meeting adjourned.